Hi guys, thanks so much. I'm really excited to be here today. Yeah, my name is Tackett. I actually hired Austin Chandler, for those who know him, as one of my first interns at Webcom. And then Morgan Day also used to work on the marketing team in my old office, so I feel really at home at Big Wing. Yeah, I love my team. Running OU social media is really fun. We're right above the Chipotle on Campus Corner. So our office always kind of faintly smells like burrito bowl steam, which isn't the worst thing in the world, but so yeah, it's great. I'm really excited to talk about inclusivity in marketing today. I first of all have to recognize that there's so many parts of this talk that I can't speak to from a personal experience, and that's a good place for all of us to start, is to realize that there's so much for us to learn. We have a lot of blind spots and we're so limited to our own perspective. So being really cognizant of that as marketers can make a really big difference for your consumers, for your business, and for society as a whole. So basically getting a baseline definition of what inclusive marketing is. And when you think about what marketing is supposed to do, it's strange that inclusivity isn't a baked-in part of the concept of marketing. It's strange that exclusive marketing has been the norm, where being exclusive in your branding can elevate your brand. So inclusive marketing is just marketing. It just doesn't advertise to one demographic. It's an attempt to go against those stereotypes that we've used when we look at demographic information. And it respects people in regard to gender, race, language, income. It takes into all these factors that when we think about the diversity within our audiences. And it's important to note that inclusive marketing isn't exploiting cultures and races to gain business. We've seen a lot of ads try to be inclusive and diverse in their marketing, and they've ended up exploiting people in real pain. So yeah, that being said, mandates for diversity and checking boxes isn't an inclusive marketing strategy. Just trying to have diversity in your social media isn't actually creating an inclusive environment in your company. So like I said, inclusive marketing needs to be a priority for your brand. Genuine inclusivity efforts will lead to better marketing. Considering a wider audience when creating messaging will expand the reach and impact of your marketing content. And the more potential customers you include, the more you have reach. The more representation you have, the more people feel less defined by rigid gender roles, outdated stereotypes, or gender roles in society. So it's this amazing opportunity where consumer dollars are actually incentivizing companies to do a good thing for society. And it's incredible that we get to be a part of that. We get to be a part of creating social change and actually becoming better at our jobs. So on a baseline, we want our marketing to respect the people that we're talking to. We want it to show that we care about them. But as marketers, we want to do so much more than that. We don't just want to show basic civility. We want to create ads that resonate with them and that represent them and that show them that our brand cares about them. And there are big and bad impacts when we don't represent people in our marketing. According to the American Marketing Association, in a new study, more than 70% of US consumers said they go out of their way to buy from brands that share their ideas and values. And they're also looking for brands that affirm their identities and affirm them as unique individuals. So there's a lot of potential to reach a broader audience if we ask ourselves, what can we do to be more compassionate, to be more cognizant of the diversity within our audiences, and how can we create more empathetic messaging that includes all people? So these are stats from a recent Forbes article about inclusivity in teams. Inclusive teams make better business decisions 87% of the time. Teams that follow an inclusive process make decisions 2 times faster with half the meetings, and decisions made and executed by diverse teams delivered 60% better results. So with inclusivity as a priority, you're gonna make your content more accessible to a bigger audience, and you're gonna appeal to an audience that thinks that inclusivity and diversity is an important value. Inclusion matters as a society. This is a study done by Nicole Martins. She used the term symbolic annihilation, which was coined in a study way earlier, where she looked at the media effects of children watching TV. And what she found was that white boys would report higher levels of self-esteem after watching media, and girls and minorities would report lower self-esteem after this. And she used the term symbolic annihilation, which basically says that if you don't see yourself represented in media, you somehow feel unimportant. And when you see yourself only in really specific roles, especially if those roles are undesirable or not what you want to do with your life, you feel like you have a very limited role to play in society. So people internalize the marketing messages that we create, and we have to be so cognizant of that. And at the end of the day, we're storytellers. Our marketing efforts are part of a larger narrative that can impact society for better or for worse. And we have a social obligation to represent all people in the media with compassion and to be really, really thoughtful about it. One thing that most companies agree with is that we have to do better in 2018 and 2019. The stakes are really high for brands that don't adapt, that don't make inclusivity a priority, and they're even higher for brands that do it and do it carelessly and end up offending people or creating really, really tone-deaf ads, as we've seen. And I was talking to Morgan earlier before starting the session, and we were talking about it's really easy to see the brands that mess up in big ways, but it's a lot harder to see the microaggressions that we may have in our marketing, and that's really important to take note of too, to remember that yeah, it's easy to look at ads and be like, oh, they were so dumb, how did this get through so many levels of review? But what's slipping through review on our levels that we're not noticing that could be harmful? So you guys probably remember the Dove ad in 2017. It was immediately criticized. They had to apologize and take down the ad. It evoked really racist imagery from Victorian soap commercials. A spokesperson said, Dove is committed to representing the beauty of diversity. In an image we posted this week, we missed the mark in thoughtfully representing women of color, and we deeply regret the offense that this caused. And on Facebook, people were asking, what was the mark? How did this make it through levels of review? It had people asking, was there diversity at the planning table when you guys released this ad? And so I also thought it was important to include a quote from Lola, who is the woman in the ad. She wrote a response the next day. She said that she really liked the Dove team. She thought they were trying to do something good in their inclusivity efforts, but they have to be more thoughtful. She said you have to consider the impact that images have, specifically when it comes to marginalized groups of women. It's important to examine whether your content shows that your consumer's voice is not only heard, but also valued. And in this tweet that you can see on the screen, they made the same mistake. They did the before and after imagery again in another tweet. And so people were like, okay, we were willing to recognize that, you know, you made a mistake and you're gonna make efforts to be more inclusive the next go around. But by the time they did it again, they were like, okay, this is a systematic problem. This cannot be fixed with diversity efforts. This has to be inclusivity that begins at the core of your organization. And then we remember the Pepsi ad, also of 2017. It's another perfect example of how diversity is not an inclusivity effort. This ad had a lot of diversity, but it came across as a really shallow exploitation of real pain in a time when there were important marches and protest for injustices happening around the world. So it's really important never to position your product or your brand as the hero in the narrative. A social worker and activist, Feminista Jones, said, brands should never make light of social issues related to people suffering. They should instead focus on selling their products in ways that don't exploit the pain of suffering or marginalized people. Uber has also been in the news a lot for messing up in inclusivity and diversity efforts. For Wife Appreciation Day, they took advantage of that and tried to capitalize on the hashtag and promote Uber Eats as a way to save your wife from having to cook that night. So people obviously were very upset by this, and I loved all like the men coming out on Twitter and being like, what is wrong with you? I cook every single night. So obviously, when they looked at the demographic, they relied on outdated gender roles to try to create marketing material. And they had a huge backlash. They had to take down the ad and apologize. Another way that brands can really miss the mark is through tokenism. And that's the practice of including a small number of people to give the illusion of sexual or racial equality without actually doing the hard work to make it a real part of your organization. So it forces an individual to become the voice for a larger group, and it's extremely damaging when that happens over time, especially. It can happen when an industry isn't prioritizing inclusivity, and it's looking for a solution that's quick and easy, and it also, again, involves mandates and checking boxes. It can be ignited by a desire to be trendy or popular without thinking really critically about what you're doing. So finally, how can we do better? Looking at brands like Pepsi and Dove and Uber, it's really obvious that a pivot in strategy isn't going to be enough to be inclusive. You can't just make inclusive marketing a part of your strategy. It has to be so much more than that. It starts at the core of an organization. It's a long-term and forward-thinking approach that starts at the top and involves all levels of the organization. And it's recognizing how your own experiences and comfort levels are going to affect the way that you work, and they're going to affect how you market and the material that you create. So these are great places to start. For one, diversifying your team. That's the most important. You got to hire interns and staff in leadership with diverse backgrounds and invite that range of perspectives to the planning table. Also, you have to look outside your team when it makes sense. You're not going to be able to have every single perspective on your team. So there's a lot of times when you're going to have to go out and ask and educate yourself. Creating inclusive copywriting is so important. We all know as language people that language and styles have coded meanings, have obvious or not so obvious meanings that can include or exclude people. So you'll want to consider when it's appropriate to use gendered or non-gendered pronouns, and just be careful with your word choice in general. And then start with the hardest voices to find. Go through and look at who you've missed and start with them first, make them a priority. That can be a great place to start. And the reason that they aren't represented right now is because they may be a hard voice for you to find, and it may be outside of your comfort zone, but really breaking through that first. And then next, do the research. Just be really curious. There's so much we don't know, and we're so limited to our own experiences and our own perspectives. So do what you can to educate yourself, stay updated, follow organizations that are doing it well, follow social media brands that are doing it well, and reach out to organizations and see what you can learn from them to improve what you're doing for your own company. And then finally, ask tough questions of yourself. What are your biases? What issues are you uninformed on that could be negatively influencing your marketing? Brands with really good intents to be inclusive have been exclusive and have created tone-deaf ads. So your intentions don't matter once you run the ad. You have to think about the effect that that's gonna have. So, hello. So start with yourself, ask yourself tough questions, and move on from there. So if you guys want to follow an incredible brand that does a really good job at inclusivity, Fenty, Rihanna's beauty brand, is incredible. They have a full range of skin matching products, and it markets that with a range of diversity on their social media accounts. This has garnered social shares and organic brand awareness because it's evident that inclusion and diversity is an inherent part of their brand, not an attempt to just gain followers. The marketing reflects a brand that is actually making huge strides in being inclusive. And the beauty industry has historically failed to represent people of color in ads and products. So when Fenty provided the products and showed diversity, it blew up on social media. So it's a great example to look to because it's not just marketing. It's an inclusive in an industry that has been, that the marketing just reflects the actual inclusivity in the industry. So definitely give Fenty a follow. So we're really, really lucky. We have positions to be able to create a positive impact. Inclusive marketing is going to be good for people, and it's good for your business. It's good for society. It's good to reflect people compassionately and to be inclusive in the media that you create. It's good for your business to expand your reach, to reach more people in your audiences that you may not even realize you were missing. And it's good for society because it fights against stereotypes, it fights against gender roles. And if we do our part to stay updated, ask for different ideas, be collaborative, we can begin to create a culture in marketing that will benefit our customers, our business, and our society. So thank you so much for having me today. Really love being here.
Would you be willing to take any questions?
Yeah, for sure, definitely.
Do you have any questions for him?
Yeah.
What if you are, let's say, at an agency, not necessarily here, but any marketing and you have a lot of clients, a lot of campaigns, and you're trying what you think is your best to be an inclusive marketer, but your clients aren't accepting that, or they're kind of shooting your ideas down, and they're doing it in such a way that they're not being explicit about why.
Yeah.
They're doing that, but you kind of have an inkling of it might be that they're not into inclusive marketing. Do you have any ideas on how to approach that?
That's a really good question. That actually happens a lot at OU when we are being inclusive. We shared a post for National Hijab Day and got a ton of backlash on Facebook. And my thought was, once it goes to social media, those voices became regulated. They were self-regulating. So people who were being hateful, people were commenting back, and it started a dialogue. And that's definitely not what I want. I don't want to put people out there I don't want to put people out there in my marketing to experience hate from other people. But I kind of think it's something that we should just do. And people who are not thinking that that's important can maybe just stop.
How do you, just to tap onto that, sorry, how do you handle that when it's a client and not necessarily people on social media? So like you can't even put it on social media because the client doesn't want diversity, because I've experienced that.
Wow.
Where like we've had somebody who has a darker skin tone, even just like a Latina, you know, and that was shut down because they said that it doesn't look good on someone of that skin color, which is, I know, horrible, but this is like personal, like this happened to me. Yeah, it's real life. So how do you handle that with the client?
We also get where they don't even want to say why they're not accepting the work, so it puts us in a hard position. So we're any marketer.
Right,
Yeah.
Definitely. I mean, I really don't know, besides making them be upfront about what it is they don't like about that, and maybe opening that up to a conversation about, hey, if you can't sell it as, you know, this is important, you can sell it as, you may not recognize the value this has for your brand. You may not recognize that this is going to help you reach bigger audiences, and millennials will want to see, they don't want to be in an echo chamber of their own experiences. They want to be exposed to to diversity. So I guess you could sell it as this will ultimately benefit you. You have biases that are potentially skewing how you think about this, but as a marketing professional, I can tell you right now that this is good for your brand.
And then I'll piggyback on what you just said. I think honestly, like, if you have a client who they're probably not wanting to be open about why, because they know that it sounds bad. and they know it's bad. Whether or not they acknowledge that it's bad for their business is a whole other thing, but of course nobody wants to have that label, and that's what they're trying to avoid, but they still have the label because they're not wanting it in their marketing. But just like what she said, to be completely clear with them and just say, hey, let me tell you a little bit more about inclusive marketing and why it's so important for you as an individual and also your brand. And after that, if they make the choice to still do what they're doing, that is their choice as a brand. And I would almost talk to, because obviously, as Big Wing, I would almost talk to the manager about putting something in writing where they sign off saying that they were not interested in inclusive marketing, and that way they can never come back and blame us or Big Wing for our marketing endeavors failed because of Big Wing or you as the person taking care of their business, all because they chose not to do that, and that was their choice, but not yours because you left that wide open for them to take advantage of, like she was saying. So I mean, ultimately, it still comes down to them. Like, they hire us as an extension of their business, but if they're not wanting to play the way that things really should be played, especially in our world today, then ultimately that's their demise. We can only do the best that we can do.
Yeah, because despite what they think, I think that being exclusive in your marketing is only going to hurt your brand.
Exactly.
In 2018 and 2019.
Yeah. Anybody else?
Yeah.
So Emily, if you're wanting to do like a digital marketing campaign and you're wanting to make sure it's hitting the sweet spot and it's not like Pepsi, they tried so hard to have all the diversity but it didn't work. Are there focus groups you can send your marketing campaign out to prior to and get some feedback? Like, Hollywood has 3 different endings to a movie. They might send it to 3 different focus groups and try to get the feedback and see how the audience, or they play it in front of an audience before they release it. I mean, with the internet, and is there a low cost to having your campaign, have someone look at it for some feedback before it goes online and gets social, so you hit the sweet spot and it'll look like you messed up because you tried too hard, or had tokenism? How can someone address that?
I think that's a great idea. Finding focus groups that can look at it and make sure that, okay, from my perspective, this is really offensive before it goes out. Personally, I don't know about any platforms or services that do that. Do you know of any?
I wouldn't be surprised if there's some out there, but I wouldn't know. We'll have to look into it. Surely there's something.
Yeah, and that's a great idea. That, again, is looking outside your team if your team doesn't have all the perspectives. And I think what went wrong with Pepsi is that they looked at it and they're like, oh, like, protests are cool, protests are trendy. And it's like, they're not a trend, they're because people are experiencing injustice. So as long as you're looking at what you're including and it's not an attempt to be trendy or on brand, and it's a genuine effort, it'll come across that way. And if it reflects an inclusive brand that's actually, like Fenty, that actually works to be inclusive in their products and their services, then again, it's going to come off as genuine too.
Question real quick about airlines.
Yeah.
Whenever you're on the flight, they have those pre-flight videos. Is that tokenism, or is that inclusion where they show all races, backgrounds, ethnicities of their staff explaining the safety of the airplane?
I feel like that's inclusivity, especially in an airline. They are for all people traveling all around the world. It is a reflection of what their brand does, connecting us all and being able to travel all around the world. Yeah, I think tokenism is when one person from that group has to become the spokesperson for the entire group, and that can really quickly lead to stereotyping. I don't think that's the case in airline flights because they're all talking about the same thing, and as long as they're not stereotyping them in any way, then it's inclusive.
I mean, I get what you're saying though, because I've always felt like it's sort of cop-out, because they may not do marketing, like inclusive marketing anywhere else, but in that one place, like at least in some of the airlines I've been on, like it doesn't feel inclusive anywhere else, but in that one video, they are.
It feels like checking boxes.
Yeah. I'd sit there and actually make sure they check boxes.
Yeah, and so I get what you're saying, because like that, they did that point.
Well, and in general advertising, like I have friends of all different nationalities that they always make that joke, like, oh, they're just checking off that box.
Yeah.
Oh, they have that one token girl or that one token guy. They have to have that ad. Like I grew up hearing that from friends. Like, so it's definitely habit for people to automatically go and assume that for sure. And that I think is probably a big thing about being able to connect in marketing today, because you already have that stigma, and so you have to be able to try to transition from that stigma of those checking boxes and make it seem more organic in its nature, which is kind of tricky sometimes.
Definitely.
Yeah. Anybody else?
Just to piggyback off of that, it's kind of going into, like you said in your slide, you have to do the research and find the hard stories. Like for instance, I noticed a certain local magazine, I had looked at 3 different issues and did not see a single person of color unless it was an ad. So that for me, it's like, you're trying to check off a box, but it doesn't matter because that's something someone paid for.
Right.
To have that ad in, you're not going out and seeking the stories. And for Oklahoma City to be 48% non-white,
Yeah. It's a big
why
deal.
do you not have any?
Yes.
So it's going into, okay, are the people sitting at the table representative of the community that we serve? And if they're not, how can we find those voices? For the airline, if I see that and I can't go on your social media and see 1 of 10 posts that have a person of color, I'm gonna think you're full of it. Like,
Definitely. If it's not holistic, if it only exists in certain parts, then
and even if that's something that you're trying to change, know that, okay, in the past, this is how we have been. If we want to change that, we got to do this across the board. So don't start with one thing, flood everything with those different messages instead of starting with one. Because even if I see that first one, I'm going to go back to your social channel and be like, okay.
yeah.
So it's more of making sure, even though you're checking off boxes, like make sure you're doing that in a genuine way. Don't just use their faces, use their stories, use their background. Try to help other people understand that there are other voices out there rather than let's just put their faces in there.
Definitely, and that's like one of the biggest dangers. If there's only one person of color in an entire magazine, then that makes that person have to stand for the entire group when you have so many things that make you a unique individual that people who are represented get to be represented in every capacity. And when tokenism happens, you are limited to that one capacity, and the exposure is less and less every single time. So definitely. Yeah.
One interesting thing, I think, you were mentioning focus groups, and I think that goes back to, at the core of our company, does everybody have a seat at the table? Do we have inclusion within our company? Because it's more than just ads, missing reviews, missing the mark, and being tone deaf. It's who are we hiring? Who makes up our company? And then in regard to Fenty, what I loved about Fenty is that beauty movement put every other brand on blast. And it became very apparent who was doing the good work to begin with and who just jumped on the train.
Yeah.
And we learned very quickly that brands like Estee Lauder, some of their sub-brands were already doing the work. But like your Saint Laurent, your big, for all of us who are like big beauty people, we saw very quickly who just hopped on the train and made a buck off of it. And it created a really cool dialogue. So
They're trying to save themselves because it's holding them accountable.
props to Rihanna.
Yeah.
And it seemed really insincere, like, didn't matter at that point.
Yeah, like Dove, for instance, we talked about, like, they've been problematic from the get-go. Like, because when I was seeing these ads, I was like, don't even, because your bottles literally say from dark to normal skin. Like,
Yeah.
So I don't care what you put on social media, your products themselves segment everyone.
Right.
Unless we have normal skin. So like, make sure your product itself, your brand itself, doesn't have that label on it, because it doesn't matter what your social media says if that's at the core of who your brand is.
Definitely. If you're just using it to gain business,
Yeah.
people see through it.
Well, honestly, if you think about it, like them having that on their product, like, just like you said, it doesn't matter what they're going to try to market.
That's their narrative.
That's what they're
saying.
like, that kills them. Like, why? That's just not smart at all, but that's fun. Because you want, I mean, it's different if you see like these Jergens, like tanning lotions, and it's like, oh, from light to medium skin tone, medium to dark skin tone for increased glow. That's a different type because you're talking about what the product will do. But then that goes back to like the Dove commercial that you were showing. Like, have all of you seen, like, you guys haven't seen, I don't even know if it's up anywhere. I remember when I first saw it and my jaw dropped because I thought, oh my God, they really, wow. Yeah, it's interesting. It definitely makes you pay more attention to it for sure.
Definitely.
Yeah. Anybody else?